Across the vast landscape of Greek mythology, there are tales of gods who shook the heavens, heroes who conquered monsters, and kings who ruled over mighty empires. Yet, among these stories filled with divine power and masculine triumph, there exists a people who stand apart, fierce, untamed, and unforgettable. They were women, yet unlike the women the Greeks knew in their daily lives. They carried bows instead of distaffs, rode horses into battle instead of weaving at the loom, and chose glory and death in war over the quiet life of marriage and childbearing. To the Greeks, they were both a terrifying enemy and a captivating enigma. These were the Amazons, the legendary race of warrior women. The very mention of the Amazons stirred both admiration and unease in ancient listeners. They were not just another tribe tucked away in some far corner of the Greek imagination. Instead, they embodied something far greater, the idea of the other, of a world that was radically different from the ordered, patriarchal society of Greece. While Greek women were largely confined to the home, expected to remain silent, obedient, and subordinate, the Amazons represented the complete reversal of that order. They were women who ruled, who fought, who refused to bow to men. In short, they were everything the Greeks both feared and secretly marveled at. But who were they really? Were they a myth spun from the fears of men about what might happen if women claimed power for themselves? Or were they inspired by real warrior women living beyond Greece's borders, whose reputation echoed across the ancient world? To answer these questions, we must journey into the stories, the symbols, and the legends that surround the Amazons. The Greeks imagined the Amazons as living on the very edges of the known world. Some placed them near the Black Sea, in Scythia, a land already famous for its skilled horsemen and archers. Others claimed they lived in Asia Minor, near the city of Ephesus, where the great temple of Artemis stood. Still others pushed them even farther into distant lands, Thrace, Libya, even as far as India. Wherever they were imagined, they were always on the borders of civilization, in the wild places where order ended and mystery began. In these distant realms, the Amazons built their societies. Ancient writers described them as living in matriarchal kingdoms, ruled by their queens. Men had little or no role, often only used for reproduction, and sometimes even exiled or killed afterward. The women trained in the arts of war from childhood, mastering archery, horse riding, and spear fighting. They went to battle clad in armor, often carrying crescent-shaped shields and wielding double-headed axes, symbols that linked them to gods of both war and fertility. Their very existence stood in stark contrast to the Greek way of life, where women were excluded from politics, warfare, and even public life. For the Greeks, the Amazons were a paradox. On the one hand, they were dangerous, a reminder of the chaos that might follow if women stepped outside the roles assigned to them. On the other hand, they were captivating, so much so that some of the greatest Greek heroes, like Heracles, Theseus, and Achilles, encountered them in their myths. The stories of these encounters reveal much about how the Greeks viewed the Amazons, not simply as monsters to be destroyed, but as equals worthy of respect, even if they ultimately had to be subdued. Even their name carries a weight of mystery. The word Amazon has been explained in different ways throughout history. Some ancient writers believed it came from the Greek amazos, meaning without breast. They claimed the Amazons cut off one of their breasts so they could more easily draw their bows in battle. Yet, interestingly, no ancient artwork depicts them this way. On vases and in sculptures, they are shown with bodies intact, often beautiful, strong, and athletic. This suggests the without breast theory may have been an invention, a way for the Greeks to explain a foreign-sounding name while emphasizing how different and alien these women were. Other scholars suggest the name may have come from non-Greek languages, perhaps from the Iranian or Caucasian regions, meaning something closer to warrior or fighter. If true, this would point to the Amazons being inspired by real women of the nomadic tribes living beyond Greece's frontiers, tribes where both men and women fought on horseback, and where female warriors may have been more common than in Greece. To understand the fascination with the Amazons, we need to remember how unusual their myth was in the Greek world. In Greek society, women were not warriors. Their roles were tied to the home, to marriage, and to raising children. To imagine a society where women not only fought but ruled was to imagine a world turned upside down. It was both thrilling and threatening. The Amazons, then, were more than just enemies in heroic tales. They were a reflection of Greek anxieties about gender, power, and the boundaries of civilization. They embodied the question, what happens when women reject the roles assigned to them? Will they become monstrous? Or will they become heroes in their own right? The Amazons appear in some of the oldest layers of Greek mythology. Homer's Iliad, one of the earliest surviving works of Greek literature, briefly mentions them as Antiope, a word that means the equals of men, or even those who fight like men. This title alone reveals how the Greeks viewed them, not as lesser, but as women who could stand shoulder to shoulder with the greatest warriors. Over time, the Amazons became recurring figures in the myths of Greece's greatest heroes. Heracles fought them in his quest for the belt of their queen Hippolyta. Theseus clashed with them when he abducted the Amazon Antiope, sparking a war in Athens. And during the Trojan War, the Amazon queen Penthesilea arrived to aid the Trojans, only to meet her tragic end at the hands of Achilles. Each of these encounters reveals something about the Amazons and about the Greek imagination that gave them life. Why, then, do the Amazons continue to captivate us even today? Perhaps it is because they are more than just figures of legend. They are symbols of independence, defiance, and power, qualities that still resonate in a world where women continue to challenge boundaries and claim spaces long denied to them. Whether they were purely mythical inventions or echoes of real warrior women from the steppes, the Amazons stand as one of the most enduring and intriguing figures of Greek mythology. As we continue this journey, we will dive deeper into their origins and symbolism, uncover the stories of their queens, explore their battles with Greek heroes, and trace their lasting legacy. But first, we must pause here, at the threshold of their legend, and recognize them for what they truly were. Not simply foes of men, nor merely a myth of reversal, but a mirror through which the Greeks, and perhaps even we today, see both our fears and our admiration for women who refuse to be bound. When we speak of the Amazons, we are not merely speaking of a tribe of warrior women, but of a people whose very existence straddled the line between myth and reality. To the Greeks, the Amazons were both fascinating and unsettling, an alien society that inverted everything the Greeks believed about gender, power, and the natural order. Yet behind the myths, behind the tales of queens and wars, lies a deeper question. Where did the Amazons come from, and what did they mean to the ancient world? Greek storytellers often gave the Amazons divine roots. Many traditions linked them to Ares, the god of war, whose fury and bloodlust coursed through their veins. In some accounts, they were said to be his daughters, born from unions between the war god and mortal women, making them destined for battle from the moment of birth. Their ferocity, their love of combat, and their lack of hesitation in war were all explained as the natural inheritance of Ares' children. Others tied the Amazons to Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, the wilderness, and maidenhood. While Ares symbolized the chaos and destruction of war, Artemis represented independence, the rejection of marriage, and the strength found in untamed lands. To link the Amazons with Artemis was to tie them to the freedom of the forest, the bough, and the rejection of male authority. In fact, ancient cities such as Ephesus, home to one of the greatest temples of Artemis, claimed that the Amazons had been the first to worship her there. This association painted them not simply as warriors, but as women bound to the natural world and the freedom of the hunt. There are even stories that connect them to river gods or primordial figures, suggesting that the Amazons were as old as the earth itself. Their origins, in myth, were deliberately distant and hazy because they were meant to embody what was far away, foreign, and otherworldly. In Greek imagination, the Amazons did not live in the familiar lands of Greece, but always on its fringes, beyond the Black Sea, in Scythia, Thrace, or Asia Minor. To the Greeks, the edges of the world were places of danger and marvel, where strange peoples lived and natural laws seemed inverted. To situate the Amazons, there was to mark them as both real and unreal, plausible and yet unreachable. The historian Herodotus, often called the father of history, offered one of the most intriguing accounts. Writing in the 5th century BCE, He claimed that after being defeated by the Greeks, a group of Amazons was captured and put on ships. But the Amazons overpowered their captors, escaped, and landed near Scythia. There, they joined with the nomadic Scythians, a people famed for their horsemanship and archery. According to Herodotus, their descendants became the Sauromaeans, a tribe in which women continued to ride, hunt, and fight alongside men. This story hints that the Amazons may not have been entirely fictional. Among nomadic tribes of the Eurasian steppe, archaeologists have found graves of women buried with weapons, armor, and horses, clear signs that they fought as warriors. These discoveries suggest that tales of the Amazons could have been inspired by encounters with real warrior women, whose existence shocked the Greeks and fueled stories of entire nations of armed women. The Amazons were never just characters in stories. They were symbols. To the Greeks, they represented the inversion of their own values, the nightmare of a society turned upside down. Greek society was patriarchal to its core. Men ruled the household, politics, and warfare. Women, especially in Athens, were expected to remain indoors, managing the home and raising children, with almost no public role. To imagine a society where women were rulers, warriors, and decision-makers was to imagine a complete reversal of order. Thus, the Amazons symbolized the anti-Greek world, a land where nature and society were warped, where gender roles were flipped, and where chaos threatened the stability of civilization. But at the same time, they also symbolized something alluring. They were strong, brave, and unyielding. Even Greek heroes who fought them often recognized their skill and valor. To face an Amazon queen was to face an equal, something rare in Greek heroic tales. In this way, the Amazons symbolized not only danger but also respect. They were the ultimate test of a hero's strength, precisely because they were not monsters but humans who could match men in skill. Much of their symbolism also rests in their very name. As mentioned earlier, one popular Greek explanation was that it came from Amazos, meaning without breast. The story went that Amazons removed one breast to better use the bow. While dramatic, this explanation is almost certainly a Greek invention. No ancient artwork shows such mutilation, and the Greeks themselves loved such tales of bodily difference as proof of foreign strangeness. Other scholars suggest the name might come from non-Greek languages. Some point to Iranian roots meaning warrior or fighter. If true, this would mean that the Greeks adopted the term from neighboring cultures who already knew of women warriors on the steppes. In either case, the ambiguity of the name only deepened their aura of mystery. The symbolic power of the Amazons is most clearly seen in Greek art, particularly in the Amazonomachy, the depictions of battles between Greeks and Amazons. These scenes were carved into temple friezes, painted on vases, and immortalized in sculpture. To the Greeks, these battles were more than exciting stories. They were allegories. The Amazonomachy symbolized the triumph of order over chaos, civilization over barbarism, male over female. Just as battles against centaurs or giants represented the Greeks' victory over wild forces of nature, battles against the Amazons represented their victory over a world that inverted their social norms. Yet there is something striking about these depictions. The Amazons are never shown as grotesque or monstrous. They are beautiful, noble, and valiant. Their deaths are tragic, not ugly. In this way, the Amazonomachy was not just about demonizing them, but about elevating them as worthy opponents. By defeating the Amazons, the Greeks not only affirmed their social order, but also glorified themselves by showing they could overcome such formidable foes. At the heart of the Amazons' symbolism lies a tension between fear and desire. On one hand, they embodied male fears of women who refused submission, who rejected marriage, and who took power for themselves. To the Greek imagination, such women were dangerous, destabilizing, even monstrous. On the other hand, the Amazons embodied qualities the Greeks admired: courage, strength, loyalty, and independence. Many myths involve Greek heroes not only fighting Amazons, but falling in love with them. Theseus with Antiope, Achilles with Penthesilea, at least in some versions. The Amazons were not simply enemies to be destroyed, but women to be desired, respected, and even mourned. This duality gave them their lasting power as symbols. They were both the nightmare of disorder and the dream of equality. They revealed the fragility of Greek gender roles while offering a tantalizing vision of something different. Modern archaeology has added another layer to this story. Excavations across the Eurasian steppe, in lands once occupied by the Scythians, Sarmatians, and other nomadic peoples, have uncovered the graves of women buried with weapons, arrows, and even full battle gear. Some were clearly warriors, having sustained injuries from combat. These discoveries confirm that among these tribes, women did indeed fight alongside men. It is entirely possible, then, that Greek traders, mercenaries, or colonists encountered these warrior women and brought back stories that, over time, grew into the legend of the Amazons. If so, then the Amazons are not pure invention, but mythologized memories of real encounters with fierce women warriors from beyond Greece's borders. Whether purely myth or partly inspired by reality, the Amazons became one of the most enduring symbols of the Greek imagination. They were a warning, a fascination, and an obsession. They stood for everything the Greeks were not, and yet everything they could not stop thinking about. To the Greeks, the Amazons were a reminder that the world was larger than themselves, that other ways of living existed, and that women, too, could wield power and weapons. Their origins may have been shrouded in myth, but their symbolism was clear. They were both a threat and a mirror, reflecting Greek society's deepest anxieties and secret admirations. The Amazons, as a people, captured the Greek imagination, but it was their queens, their leaders, their faces of strength and tragedy, who burned brightest in myth. These women were not vague figures on the horizon of imagination. They were queens with names, personalities, and destinies woven into the fabric of Greek heroic tales. Through them, the Greeks told stories of love and betrayal, courage and downfall, and the eternal clash between men and women, order and inversion. Three names rise above the rest: Hippolyta, Antiope, and Penthesilea. Our first queen, Hippolyta, strides into legend in one of the most famous adventures of the Greek hero Heracles. Heracles, the son of Zeus and the greatest of Greek heroes, was sentenced to perform 12 impossible labors as penance for a terrible crime. Among them was his ninth labor, to obtain the girdle, belt, of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. This was no ordinary belt. It had been given to Hippolyta by her father, Ares, the god of war, and it symbolized her authority as queen and her power as a warrior. To take the belt was not just to steal jewelry. It was to rob her of her divine inheritance and her sovereignty. When Heracles set out, he expected war. The Amazons were fearsome, after all, yet when he arrived in their land, Hippolyta did not greet him with hostility. Instead, the myths say, she was curious about this larger-than-life man. In some versions, she even fell in love with him. Willingly, she agreed to give him the belt. It could have been a rare story of peace and understanding between the Greeks and the Amazons. But the gods, as always, had other plans. Hera, queen of the gods and bitter enemy of Heracles, whispered rumors among the Amazons. She spread the lie that Heracles had come not for the belt, but to abduct their queen. Enraged, the Amazons armed themselves and attacked. A brutal battle followed, with Heracles cutting down warriors left and right. In the chaos, Hippolyta was killed, some say by Heracles himself, others by accident amid the bloodshed. The belt was taken, the labor complete. Yet the story of Hippolyta's death left a lingering sadness. She had offered peace, perhaps even love, but the meddling of the gods and the inevitability of Greek heroism ensured only destruction. Hippolyta became a symbol of what happens when worlds collide. The warrior queen undone not by her own weakness, but by divine deceit and human misunderstanding. If Hippolyta's story was one of tragedy, Antiope's was one of war and betrayal. Antiope, sometimes said to be Hippolyta's sister, was another famed queen of the Amazons. Her story intertwines with that of Theseus, the hero and king of Athens, most famous for slaying the Minotaur. The myths tell us that when Heracles battled the Amazons, Theseus accompanied him. In the aftermath, Theseus either fell in love with Antiope or abducted her. Accounts differ, as they often do in mythology. What is clear is that Antiope found herself taken to Athens, where she became bound to Theseus. Some versions say she married him willingly, bearing him a son named Hippolytus. Others insist it was abduction, a violent theft of the Amazon queen from her people. For the Amazons, this was not something to forgive. They raised their armies and marched on Athens, determined to reclaim their queen and punish the city. What followed was the Attic War, one of the greatest legendary conflicts between Greeks and Amazons. The Amazons crossed the Aegean, landing in Attica, and laid siege to Athens. The Athenians fought bravely, but the Amazons were fierce, and the battle raged across the land. In some accounts, the Amazons even broke into the city itself, fighting in the very heart of Athens. Yet in the end, Theseus and his men prevailed. The tragedy, however, lay with Antiope. In one version, she betrayed her sisters and fought alongside Theseus, only to be killed in the battle, cut down by her own people. In another, she led the Amazons against Athens but was struck down by Theseus himself. Either way, her death sealed the fate of the war. For the Greeks, this myth was deeply symbolic. The Amazons invading Athens represented chaos breaking into the heart of civilization, threatening its order. Their defeat reaffirmed Athens as a city of strength, order, and masculine power. Yet Antiope's role complicates the story. She was both victim and traitor, wife and queen, torn between two worlds. Her death was not just the fall of a warrior, but the breaking of a bridge between the Greeks and the Amazons. If Hippolyta's tale was tragic and Antiope's was torn, the story of Penthesilea is the most haunting of all. Penthesilea, another daughter of Ares, was queen of the Amazons during the time of the Trojan War. When Hector, the noble prince of Troy, fell at the hands of Achilles, Troy mourned, and its defenders weakened. Into this despair rode Penthesilea, leading her Amazon warriors to aid the Trojans. She came not only for war, but also for redemption. For Penthesilea carried with her a terrible burden. She had accidentally killed her own sister, Hippolyta or Hippolyte, in a hunting accident. Consumed by guilt, she sought death in battle, hoping that a glorious end might atone for her crime. The arrival of Penthesilea electrified the battlefield. Clad in shining armor, wielding spear and bow, she fought with unmatched fury. The Trojans took heart at her bravery, and even the Greeks were astonished at her skill. She cut down warriors with ease, carving her place in the bloody saga of Troy. But fate had marked her for one opponent, Achilles, the greatest warrior of Greece. When the two met in battle, it was a clash of titans, man against woman, hero against queen. Penthesilea fought valiantly, and some say she even wounded Achilles. But in the end, he struck her down with his spear, ending her life in a single, devastating blow. And then came the twist. As Achilles looked upon her fallen body, he was overcome. Struck by her beauty, her courage, and the tragedy of her death, he felt something he had never felt before: love, or perhaps something deeper, a recognition of her as his equal. Some stories say he wept over her corpse, regretting that he had killed her. Others tell of him gently closing her eyes, mourning the warrior queen who had deserved a better fate. The Greeks, of course, were quick to mock him. One soldier, Thersites, accused Achilles of weakness, of falling in love with a dead woman. Enraged, Achilles killed Thersites on the spot. Whether love or respect, Achilles' reaction revealed what made Penthesilea's story so powerful. She was not a monster or an enemy to be despised, but a warrior equal to the greatest of men. Penthesilea's story endures as one of the most poignant episodes in Greek mythology. She embodies the tragic nobility of the Amazons, their courage, their independence, and their inevitable downfall in the face of Greek heroes. Her death at Troy was not just another casualty of war. It was the silencing of a woman who could have rivaled the greatest of men. Hippolyta, Antiope, and Penthesilea each reveal a different aspect of the Amazons' place in Greek imagination. Hippolyta shows us the tragic misunderstanding between worlds, where peace is shattered by divine meddling and fear. Antiope reveals the tension between love and loyalty, civilization and chaos, and the tragic impossibility of reconciling the two. Penthesilea embodies the nobility of the Amazons, a queen who fought not out of malice but out of grief and redemption, and who earned even her enemies' awe. Together, they tell us that the Amazons were not mere villains. They were complex figures, worthy opponents, tragic heroines, and mirrors of the Greeks' own struggles with gender, power, and fate. The Amazons were not only remembered as mysterious warrior women living beyond the known world. They became the Greeks' most enduring symbol of the eternal clash between chaos and order, between the foreign and the familiar, between the untamed and the civilized. This clash was so central to Greek imagination that it had its own name, Amazonomachy, meaning literally, the battle against the Amazons. Whenever the Greeks carved their temples or painted their vases, they returned again and again to these fierce encounters. The images were not just decorations. They were statements, reflections of how the Greeks saw themselves and the world around them. Through depictions of warriors locked in mortal combat with Amazons, the Greeks expressed their fears of a society ruled by women, their anxieties about outsiders, and their own pride in the triumph of their civilization. But behind this cultural symbolism lie the stories, the myths of bloodshed, love, betrayal, and tragedy that made the Amazonomachy more than just allegory. Let us explore these legendary battles, the heroes who fought them, and the deeper meanings they carried. Among the most famous Amazonomachyes was the Attic War, when the Amazons themselves invaded Athens. This tale is woven tightly with the story of Theseus, king of Athens, and his encounter with the Amazon queen Antiope, or in some versions, Hippolyta. According to the myth, Theseus either joined Heracles on his expedition against the Amazons or led his own. He abducted Antiope, or perhaps married her, depending on the storyteller, and brought her back to Athens. Some say it was a romance born of passion, others a violent act of abduction. But whatever the cause, the Amazons did not forgive. Enraged, they marched across the Aegean, a tide of women warriors storming into the heart of Greece. They did what no foreign army had done before. They invaded Athens itself. Legends describe their camp on the Areopagus Hill, the very place where Athenians later held their trials and debated justice. The battle was fierce and bloody, with warriors clashing in the streets. Some accounts tell us that Antiope herself fought alongside Theseus, torn between her sisters and her new love. In one tragic version, she was struck down in battle, killed accidentally by an Amazon's spear, or by Theseus himself. In the end, the Athenians prevailed. The Amazons were driven back, defeated, but not erased. Their invasion lived on in memory, and Athenians never forgot that their city had once been tested by these warrior women. On the walls of the Stoa Poikile, one of Athens' great public spaces, artists immortalized the scene, men battling Amazons in a frenzy of combat, civilization against the wild. For Athenians, the Attic War became more than a tale. It was a symbol of their city's endurance and supremacy. The Amazons represented the ultimate other, and by defeating them, Athens proved itself not only militarily strong, but also morally superior. Another Amazonomachy was tied to one of the greatest heroes of all, Heracles. In his ninth labor, he was commanded to bring back the girdle of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. This girdle was no ordinary ornament. It was a gift from Ares, god of war, and a symbol of her authority and power. At first, Hippolyta was willing to give it to him. Perhaps she admired his strength, or perhaps there was mutual respect between warrior and warrior. But Hera, ever jealous of Heracles, would not let this labor be so easy. She disguised herself as an Amazon and spread the rumor that Heracles had come to abduct their queen. The Amazons rushed into battle, and blood spilled across the field. Heracles, surrounded, fought with ferocity. Some versions say Hippolyta was killed in the struggle, others that she felt a treachery, or even Heracles' hand. In any case, he took the girdle and left, leaving the Amazons in mourning. Here again was the theme of Amazonomachy, men and women locked in a battle of strength, misunderstanding, and tragic violence. In Heracles' story, the Amazons became not just adversaries, but victims of divine manipulation, pawns in Hera's eternal rivalry with Zeus' son. The most haunting Amazonomachy unfolded on the fields of Troy during the Trojan War. The war had raged for years, and blood had stained the earth countless times. Into this chaos rode Penthesilea, queen of the Amazons, leading her warriors to the side of the Trojans. Penthesilea was not merely a queen, she was a figure of tragedy. Some myths tell that she had accidentally slain her sister, and in her grief sought a noble death to redeem herself. Troy, besieged and desperate, gave her that chance. The Amazons charged into battle, their arrows raining upon the Greeks. Penthesilea herself shone like Artemis in war, striking down men with precision and fury. But fate had written another ending. She faced Achilles, the greatest of the Greeks, and their duel became legendary. The clash was brutal, each warrior unmatched in skill. Finally, Achilles struck her down. But as she fell, something unexpected happened. Achilles looked upon her face and was overcome with awe, even love. In that moment, he regretted killing her, for he saw in her not only a foe but a kindred spirit, a warrior equal to himself. This scene, retold by poets and painters, gave the Amazon myth its most tragic and human moment. In Penthesilea, the Amazons were no longer just the other. They were equals, whose loss carried weight, even for their enemies. Her death was not merely a Greek victory. It was a reminder of the cost of war, of the humanity that even enemies share. The myths of Amazonomachy spilled into the stones and pottery of Greece. On temple friezes, vase paintings, and sculptures, Amazons clashed with Greeks in vivid detail. The Parthenon in Athens, the Temple of Apollo at Bassae, and countless other monuments displayed Amazonomachies alongside scenes of centaur battles and the Gigantomachy, the battle with the giants. Why? Because for the Greeks, these myths were not mere stories. They were allegories of the eternal conflict between order and disorder, civilization and barbarism. To fight Amazons was to fight the inversion of the natural order, the idea of women ruling men, of foreigners threatening Greek values. Yet, these depictions also betray a kind of admiration. The Amazons are not shown as weak. They are fierce, skilled, and beautiful, often in dynamic poses that mirror their Greek opponents. In art, as in myth, they were both feared and respected. Through these battles, the Greeks told a story about themselves. The Amazons were the embodiment of what lay beyond their borders. Women who refused to be bound by marriage, foreigners who lived differently, warriors who challenged the very structure of Greek life. By defeating them in myth, the Greeks reassured themselves of their own superiority. And yet, in stories like Penthesilea, there lingers an acknowledgement. The Amazons were not merely monsters to be crushed, but noble adversaries who demanded respect. Their defeat may have been inevitable, but their courage, their skill, and their tragedy made them unforgettable. The Amazonomachy was never just about war. It was about the struggle between the known and the unknown, the familiar and the foreign, the male and the female, the civilized and the wild. By battling Amazons in myth and art, the Greeks defined themselves, but in doing so, they also immortalized their enemies. For even in defeat, the Amazons remain among the most enduring figures of Greek mythology, forever riding into battle, fierce and unyielding, against the heroes of legend. The Amazons, though born from myth, never remained confined to the dusty scrolls of poets or the painted figures on Greek pottery. They lived on in memory, retold in every age with new voices and reshaped to meet new needs. Their legend crossed from myth into history, from Greece to Rome, from medieval Europe to the modern imagination. And even now, in the 21st century, we see them everywhere, on movie screens, in comic books, in the symbols of feminism, and in the enduring fascination with warrior women who refuse to bow to the expectations of society. The Amazon's legacy is therefore not a single tale, but a long continuum, a thread woven through cultures for more than 2,000 years. To understand this legacy, we must follow it from antiquity, through the Middle Ages, and into the modern world. For the Greeks, the Amazons were more than stories of thrilling battles. They were a cultural mirror. Amazonomachy, the endless wars between Greeks and Amazons, decorated temples and sacred sites as reminders of Greek triumph over chaos and foreignness. Yet at the same time, their depictions were not caricatures. Artists portrayed Amazons with dignity, skill, and beauty, showing them as worthy foes. When the Romans inherited Greek culture, they too inherited the Amazons. Roman writers such as Virgil and Diodorus Siculus retold their myths, often reshaping them to fit Roman ideals. The Romans were fascinated by strong foreign queens, from Dido of Carthage to Cleopatra of Egypt, and the Amazons fit neatly into that fascination. In Roman art and literature, Amazons became symbols of martial valor, exotic beauty, and the eternal appeal of women who defied traditional roles. Even in antiquity, the line between myth and history was blurred. Greek historians like Herodotus speculated that the Amazons might have been inspired by real peoples, perhaps the Scythians or Sarmatians, nomadic tribes of the steppes where women sometimes fought alongside men. Herodotus himself tells a story of Amazons captured by the Greeks who later escaped, encountered the Scythians, and intermarried with them, creating a new people who carried on Amazon customs. Modern archaeology has uncovered Scythian burial sites where women were buried with weapons, their bones bearing marks of combat. This has led many scholars to suggest that the Amazons were not purely myth, but mythologized memories of warrior women from the Eurasian steppes. Thus, even in their earliest retellings, the Amazons occupied a strange place between fantasy and possibility, a place that continues to intrigue historians and archaeologists to this day. As Europe entered the medieval era, the Amazons did not vanish. Instead, they were reshaped to fit the imagination of knights, troubadours, and chroniclers. In medieval romances, Amazons were often depicted as queens ruling distant lands, sometimes hostile, sometimes noble allies. Writers spoke of Amazon queens who built cities and fortresses, who rode into battle like men, but were also admired for their beauty. In some versions, the Amazons became examples of exotic Christian rulers, converted and brought into the fold of Europe's worldview. In others, they remained heathen outsiders, challenges for knights to overcome. Medieval maps and travel accounts also kept the legend alive. Explorers and chroniclers sometimes claimed that Amazon queens ruled lands in Africa, India, or the mysterious East. Their legend had stretched far beyond Greece, becoming part of a global geography of wonder and imagination. When European explorers sailed beyond the Mediterranean and into the Americas, they carried the myths of the Amazons with them. In 1541, the Spanish explorer Francisco de Orellana led an expedition into South America, where he claimed to have encountered fierce warrior women along the Amazon River. Whether these women were real fighters, misinterpreted locals, or simply a product of the explorer's myth-soaked imagination, the name stuck. The great river was christened the Amazon River, and with it the myth gained a new home in the landscapes of South America. This moment demonstrates the enduring power of myth. Even as Europeans claimed to discover new worlds, they explained what they saw through the lens of the old. The Amazons, legendary women of Greece, were reborn in the jungles of Brazil. During the Renaissance and Enlightenment, scholars returned to the ancient texts with new eyes. Artists painted Amazons as symbols of strength and exotic beauty. Playwrights and poets used them to challenge or reinforce ideas of gender and power. The Amazonomachy continued to be popular in visual art, used to represent not just ancient battles, but also the clash of values: order versus chaos, male versus female, self versus other. In political allegory, queens and nations could be described as Amazons, sometimes praised for their courage, sometimes criticized as unnatural. As ideas of women's roles began to shift, the Amazons became contested symbols. Were they dangerous and unnatural women, or heroic figures of independence? This tension carried forward into modern times. In the modern age, the Amazons were reborn yet again, this time as icons of feminism, resistance, and empowerment. Writers in the 19th and 20th centuries reimagined them as proto-feminist figures, women who defied patriarchal structures and proved themselves equal or superior to men in battle. The most famous modern reimagining came with the creation of Wonder Woman in 1941. Conceived during World War II by William Moulton Marston, Wonder Woman was explicitly tied to the Amazons of Greek myth. She was from Themyscira, a hidden island of warrior women descended from the Amazons, who embraced truth, justice, and peace even as they wielded great power. Wonder Woman cemented the Amazons as part of popular culture, ensuring their survival in comic books, television shows, and blockbuster films. She also transformed the Amazons from symbols of Greek otherness into symbols of female empowerment, inspiring generations with the idea of a society of strong, independent women. Today, the Amazons are everywhere, in novels, fantasy series, video games, and movies. They appear not only as warriors, but as leaders, queens, and role models, reshaped again for modern audiences. In recent decades, archaeology has added yet another chapter to their story. Excavations in Central Asia have uncovered burials of Scythian and Sarmatian women buried with weapons, sometimes in warrior poses. Many show evidence of injuries consistent with combat. For centuries, the Amazons were dismissed as fantasy. But these discoveries suggest that real women did fight alongside men in the ancient world, and their stories may have traveled into Greece to become the seed of myth. In this sense, modern archaeology has vindicated Herodotus, who long ago speculated that the Amazons were real. This blending of myth and history has given the Amazons new credibility, not just as legendary figures, but as echoes of real warriors whose lives inspired the Greeks' imagination. Why have the Amazons endured for so long? Perhaps because they embody contradictions that every society must wrestle with. They are both admired and feared, both noble and threatening, both mythic and real. They challenge the boundaries of gender, culture, and power. To the Greeks, they were symbols of the other, women who refused to obey men. To later cultures, they were exotic rulers in distant lands. To modern audiences, they are heroes and icons of strength. In every age, the Amazons have been remade, but they have never been forgotten. They speak to something deep in the human imagination, the idea that power need not be confined by gender, that warriors may come from unexpected places, and that myths have the power to outlive the civilizations that created them. The Amazons began as figures of Greek myth, riders from the edge of the known world. But their journey has carried them far beyond Greece, into Roman legend, medieval romance, colonial geography, feminist symbolism, and pop culture stardom. Their story is proof that myths do not die, they evolve. And in the Amazons, we see one of the most enduring myths of all, a myth that has outlived empires, crossed oceans, and still rides into battle in our imaginations today. The Amazons first rode into the Greek imagination as shadows from the edges of the known world. They were not ordinary foes. They were not the monstrous giants of primordial chaos, nor the cunning tricksters of divine lineage. Instead, they were human, yet entirely unlike the human order the Greeks knew. They were women who fought, ruled, and lived without men, warriors who defied every convention of Greek society. And because of that, they have never faded. To understand why the Amazons still captivate us, we must see them not only as characters in ancient myth, but as symbols that speak to timeless questions about power, gender, freedom, and the eternal fascination with those who break the rules of their age. In Greek society, women's lives were largely bound to the home. They were expected to marry, bear children, and maintain the household. Public life, politics, warfare, and exploration belonged to men. The Amazons shattered that model. They lived outside marriage, wielded weapons, ruled kingdoms, and fought on horseback with unmatched skill. To the Greeks, this was both alluring and frightening. On one hand, they admired the Amazons' courage and strength. On the other, they saw them as a direct threat to the order of society. The endless battles, the Amazonomichies, were not just entertainment. They were ways for the Greeks to play out their anxieties about gender and power. Every depiction of a Greek hero defeating an Amazon was a reassurance. Order had triumphed over inversion, civilization over chaos. And yet, the very fact that the Amazons were remembered with such beauty and ferocity shows that the Greeks could not entirely dismiss them. They feared them, but they also respected them. Part of the Amazons' enduring power lies in the tragedy woven into their myths. These are not faceless enemies easily vanquished. They are queens with names, stories, and fates as poignant as any Greek heroes. Hippolyta, whose belt Heracles sought, stands as a symbol of misunderstood intent, willing to give what he asked, yet doomed by Hera's deceit and the violence of war. Antiope, torn between love and loyalty, dies either by accident or betrayal, her story haunting the streets of Athens. Penthesilea, most tragic of all, falls at Troy only for Achilles to realize too late that in her, he had found an equal. These are not tales of faceless defeat. They are stories of dignity, loss, and recognition, stories that stir empathy even as they affirm Greek victory. This tragic quality gives the Amazons depth. They are not mere adversaries, but fully human, with hearts as vulnerable as their shields were strong. Another reason the Amazons endure is their association with the borderlands of the world. They are always elsewhere, at the edge of Scythia, across the Black Sea, in Asia Minor, or even farther afield. They are creatures of the liminal, always residing just beyond the familiar map. For the Greeks, the Amazons represented the mysteries of distant lands and the allure of the unknown. By placing them at the edge of the world, the Greeks could explore questions about difference and identity. Were their societies utterly unlike their own? Could women lead armies? Could human life look so radically different? This fascination with the edge has never disappeared. Even today, we imagine hidden societies, lost kingdoms, and utopias far from our own. The Amazons satisfy that yearning for mystery, for the possibility of a world both similar to and different from ours. Unlike many mythic peoples, the Amazons may not be entirely invented. Archaeological evidence of Scythian and Sarmatian warrior women lends weight to the idea that Greek tales were inspired by encounters, or at least stories, of real fighters from the steppes. This possibility, that the Amazons were based on flesh-and-blood women, only deepens their intrigue. They are mythic, yes, but not wholly myth. They straddle the line between imagination and reality. And it is precisely in this liminal space that myths grow strongest. For if the Amazons might have been real, then every retelling carries a spark of truth, however faint. The Amazons have endured not because they remained fixed, but because they were endlessly reinvented. To the Greeks, they were adversaries who tested heroes. To the Romans, they became exotic queens. To medieval storytellers, they were rulers of distant lands. To explorers, they gave their name to the greatest river in the world. In the modern age, they became symbols of female empowerment. The creation of Wonder Woman transformed them from adversaries into ideals, women who embody justice, truth, and independence. Films, novels, and television series continue to remake them, sometimes as fierce warriors, sometimes as tragic heroines, sometimes as utopian dreamers. Each age reshaped the Amazons to reflect its own questions, and in that process, they became timeless. At their core, the Amazons endure because they symbolize defiance. They refuse the roles assigned to them. They do not live quietly in the home, nor do they accept subordination. They ride into battle, command armies, and carve their own destinies. For women across history, the Amazons have offered a vision, sometimes inspiring, sometimes threatening, of life beyond constraint. For men, they have been both an object of fascination and a reminder that power is not theirs alone. For all of us, they embody the possibility of breaking boundaries. Today, the Amazons continue to captivate because they touch on questions still unresolved. How do we balance admiration for strength with fear of difference? How do we reconcile equality with traditions of power? What does it mean to challenge the structures of society? In every Amazon queen, we see these questions come alive. Hippolyta's belt, Antiope's torn loyalties, Penthesilea's tragic death, all remind us that the struggle between freedom and order, between gender roles and human potential, is not new. It is as old as myth itself. Imagine them now, the Amazons, still riding across the imagination. Their arrows fly in painted vases, their battles rage on temple walls, their names echo in rivers and cities. They ride not just through history, but through every era's dreams and fears. They are not gone. They never were. They are with us still, symbols of strength, of defiance, of tragedy, of possibility. The Greeks once feared that these warrior women would storm their cities and overturn their order. In a way, the Amazons have done exactly that, not with swords and spears, but with ideas and inspiration. For thousands of years, they have invaded our stories, refusing to be forgotten, refusing to be contained. And that is why the Amazons still captivate us. They are not just myths of the past. They are myths for every age, riding eternal, as fierce and unyielding as when they first appeared in the legends of Greece.